Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt. Before joining Revolut about 8 months ago, I was in the British Marines for 10 years, so a slightly different background. And now I work in the talent acquisition department as an ops manager.
Hi, I'm Wana. I work in talent ops department. I joined straight from my master's. Before I did some internships in the tech and manufacturing and sales areas.
Hello everyone, my name is Ishita. I'm an operations manager for the finance department here at Revolut. Prior to my experience here, I used to be a project manager for an investment bank, working predominantly on their ESG and sustainability projects.
I'm Eugenie. I've been at Revolut for 3 years. I work in the financial crime department as an ops manager. Both I've been on the product side, now in the strategy side.
Right from the first day that I joined the company, I was dealing with some of the most senior stakeholders within the business. So I think carrying that element of knowing how to approach an executive, what words to use, was an added advantage.
I started running my own business when I was in university, so having that take ownership skill, which is really, really important here. And every single person I've met at Revolut thinks of Revolut as their baby, and they really want to make it amazing regardless of the project that they're working on.
Fintech is one of those more fast-moving industries, of course, by the name in and of itself, with the technology changing so fast. There's agility, which plays a very important role, and the willingness to change, because I think now in today's day and age, every industry will continue to change, just fintech a little more faster than the others. But as long as you're willing to change with the times, keep asking people, keep understanding what's happening, what people's perception of different things are, and maintain that agility, be willing to go back to the drawing board or pivot in different ways to allow for those changes to be incorporated a lot more modularly within your processes, or build your processes in a more modular manner. I think that will help you keep yourself afloat in the just barrage of changes.
Just because we kind of work on a quarterly basis. I mean, I think since I've been here for 3 years, I think I've worked on a different project almost every single quarter. So you obviously can't start from scratch every single time. It's applying those same principles with problem solving and being able to address the problem and really burrow down to the root cause and understand what's going on.
I think that's something that comes out sort of in this discussion, having all come from very different backgrounds, sort of the reasons why, or rather the principles behind having delivered so many projects at Revolut are essentially the problem-solving principles that are so valuable to the company, and that's something that we test for rigorously in the application process, but then something that is really valued by the business because, as you say, because things are changing so quickly and on so many different fronts, you're facing so many different challenges.
With Revolut, I think, think deeper. Of course, you go a level deep at all points in time, but also North Star is very important to us. So knowing what your North Star is and kind of looking back at what you've built and constantly monitoring it with the perspective of that North Star, are we hitting that goal? I think that's also probably an extension of what you mentioned, Matt.
Yeah, and the remembering why, always bringing it back to the why, having it pull back to that other level is why the monitoring is so important, because at the end of the day, regardless of the department or the project, you're solving a user-facing problem, usually.
I started in recruitment actually, and then moved to talent, and I can say every single quarter I had different projects, and for me, someone could say, but you've been in talent, you know the drill. Well, the projects were completely different, and I had to adapt, and they were changing every quarter, right? So whenever you get something like a prompt, you have to have this adaptability to be like, okay, I don't know even what is asking me to do. I don't even know. Sometimes I don't even understand the first prompt, like what it means, and then basically say, okay, now I will learn everything about it in a short amount of time. I'll have the SMEs and so on, and then I will apply, as you said, this principle.
That's what's really good about Revolut, where you have so many good people. But I have no background in financial crime. I applied for a general ops position at Revolut, and I was offered something in fin crime. But because there are so many just complex things that the average person wouldn't know, and you can't possibly become an expert overnight, having those great people to rely on, and everyone's just so available to each other to actually ask And then you could take that information to solve any single problem because those same principles still follow through.
And I think it's a very important element of like just an ops manager's kind of gamut of responsibilities is you need to be able to identify which circumstance asks of you to become that subject matter expert, whereas where you're just supposed to kind of bridge the gap between the problem and its solution.
The dynamism aspect of the work is really challenging, but it's what makes it quite fun because no 2 days are the same. And if I think about talent acquisition or recruitment, I never thought that I'd be working on a project that could be, I guess, classed as applied behavioural science, looking at selecting the best candidates one day, and then the next day be focusing on more sort of like internal compliance issues and internal audits. So there's sort of a whole gamut of different things that we work on, and I guess that's what makes it so interesting.
FinCrime, I know, because the nature of the content of our work, things are always changing. The landscape of financial crime is always changing. You see it on the news, different scams, different problems, different ways that people need to be protected. That's something that's really interesting in understanding as an industry how we respond to it, and us specifically, how our approach varies for other banks and other systems and stuff like that. And also we work a lot with industries outside of Revolut in lots of different capacities. We have a little bit of creativity to create products that are specific to us. Like obviously we need to stop the same problem as other banks, but we can do it in more effective ways.
I think that scalability is something that certainly from a sort of talent and talent acquisition perspective, because we're more internal facing, is something we're also trying to implement. In terms of innovation, we're like experimenting with large language models and automation to try and make that work. And that, from my perspective, is something that's really interesting in sort of how we go about our business.
Also from an internal point of view, so 2 years ago, the maturity of the process was very different. So compared to now, we were doing a lot of things, we had a lot of projects, but now it's BAU, so business as usual. So at that point you had to, dedicate an ops that they would write some SQL, write some, do something in Excel and drive the process, right? Now it's more like, okay, we automated this, we streamlined this, we put all the automations in place. So most of the things are triggered by themselves, and we have to do small interventions here and there to make sure that the process is working as expected.
There's a lot of impetus, of course, that we have from external factors, and that we need to be ahead of the curve, we need to be at par with all banks on the street with how finance functions in and of itself, but also a big chunk of the impetus on this, like innovation and creativity, we need to incorporate as a result of the impetus we get internally, because we have so much hyper growth happening even within our products, within the business, that how finance takes on those innovations, takes on those new initiatives and incorporates them and imbibes them rightfully means that several of our product teams need to be constantly improving, identifying features that we need to incorporate, also build them out in a way that when we have other similar structures or other similar changes happening, it's the lead time to that completion or the lead time to that integration is a lot shorter as well. Scalability and make it scalable, I think across departments, every single exec or senior employees, even the most junior employees, will constantly be repeating the same phrases, but because it's so entrenched in our culture that we just inherently understand what that means. So when we are even building the simplest of processes, or if it's a very senior employee or a big room full of people who are building something extremely complex, as for FinCrime, let's say, they will all operate from the same first principles, and they will all at least agree on the fact that it needs to be simple, it needs to be effective, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be ahead of the curve. Whether we go through with that proposal or not is a separate issue, but at least the willingness to start an open conversation and understands the pros and cons, I think that's very deeply entrenched, right from the very top until the junior most employees within the businesses.
Yeah, my first week, after my first sort of ramp up at Revolut, my manager, we were launching a new product for our internal FinCrime products, was asking my opinion, being like, how do you think this looks? Does it make sense to you as kind of an outsider, but also now you're in it, and sort of speaking with them that same language, like you said. But he was asking me, and he's one of the most senior stakeholders in my department, and the fact that he really wanted my opinion and expected in every single meeting for me to have an opinion was incredible to me when I first joined.
I think you don't have that same inertia that you do at big companies, where maybe senior stakeholders aren't willing to accept change, whereas here, certainly my experience is that you could be the most junior graduate in the company. If you have a good idea and you pitch it to one of the senior leadership, they'll run with it, and that could be implemented within a month.
And it can be hard sometimes as well, right? Because to be that informed, to be, ahead of the curve, to be opinionated about sometimes problem statements that you might not have a single clue about, it's a difficult thing. But I think one commonality that I've seen having interacted with a lot of operations managers across the business is that everybody has that inherent zeal to have an opinion.
It's amazing how much the departments rely on each other, even when you don't think about it, because you'll be recognizing a problem, realize that there's something within another department, and you can reach out to any ops manager and they'll say, oh, we've noticed that problem. We're also working on a solution. Let's team up and do this together. And then you can kind of split the work and get a lot more different opinions on something, which makes those innovative solutions a lot better because you're getting it from all different aspects of the business, and then it scales for everyone.
Yeah, we've seen this when, when you copy automation of, you see someone and it's like, I've seen this, I'm gonna copy, and then in 2 weeks you see it, everyone has the same.
I remember legal sends this survey,
yeah, exactly.
Copy this. Yeah, for sure.
In my case, we get a problem statement, and first thing is, okay, we get the context around it, because sometimes we're not familiar with the problem at hand, and then we actually do a lot of analysis, our own, we get a percentage when this happens, this problem happens, and sometimes we understand that this is not actually the right problem, like they didn't, this is not the problem. Another thing that we identified is the problem. I think this is where this creativity, or let's say ownership, comes in, because then when we face this, and we then decide what is the roadmap, what are the actions that we are gonna take. A lot of the times when we come with more creative solutions, they're well received.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if you relate to this coming straight from sort of academia, but I used to think efficiency was like, you have to get it done the next day. You have to get it done within this week. And in the end goal, that's not efficient, because you need to have some breathing space to actually think about all the different ways you could solve something, but also all the different ways that those could go wrong or may not be the best solution. So just churning out a solution for the sake of efficiency is not actually going to be efficient in the end, because you have to have some creativity to consider all the other aspects. Because like you said, we get a problem statement, but you need to go down all the different routes and rabbit holes to understand actually what's best for the majority, if not all.
No two people have the same background, no two people have the same thought process. We are a global enterprise at the end of the day. Age is not a barrier, gender is not a barrier, race is not a barrier. There are no barriers in and of itself. You can have very complicated, very technical problem statements, but when you have a diverse band of people approaching it with different lenses, it also saves us from that group think, right? I never have to pretend being somebody that I'm not. I can always be my authentic self. If I'm clueless, I'm clueless. Or if I'm very strongly opinionated about something, I can be that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely this sort of tension in some cases between efficiency, i.e. getting everything we need to do done in the right time, and then creativity. And I think definitely what you were saying about diversity of thought, but also sort of taking ownership within our teams of the problems, and really structuring our thought process just buys us that time to be creative and efficient at the same time.
Data in and of itself can mean several things in several different contexts, right? At the end of the day, it's numbers. What meaning you attach to numbers in and of itself is completely contingent upon the way your brain is wired to look at situations and circumstances, and kind of reels back to the diversity of thought element that I was talking about. What root cause do I think that number comes off of versus what root cause maybe Warner thinks, or maybe Matt thinks, or Jenny thinks, can be very different. It's all about like achieving your end goal and finding different solutions for it, and then identifying which one will be the best one. So creativity gives you that gamut of options, and then efficiency helps you pick out which the best one would be.
Also, data is not just what the numbers are, it's also where you get the data from. And I think a lot of the times, at least for an example with us, was the best source of our data is our customers and what their feedback is to us, whether it's just how many things are happening, or the feedback that they can write in, or even we can ask them, we can get data in a lot of different ways that we all, even though we all come from different backgrounds, we're all still facing the problem. And sometimes the best way is we may be getting it wrong for the users, and having the incorporation of what they feel and how they will react to this is really helpful when it comes to, like you said, narrowing down that spectrum that our capabilities have us, or like adding to it as well.
And that's creativity, just in and of itself. Like these two answers where I'm mostly focused on, okay, so we have the data, how do we go forward? And Jenny just chimes in and says, no, but where do we get this data from in and of itself? That's collaborative problem solving, right? And that's what ensures that we creatively solve for that problem, because we're not just looking forward, we also stop, and Jenny says, check yourself, look back as well. Where does this data come from?
Another thing that sort of feeds into that is the fact that nothing is sacred at Revolut. If you're coming up against a problem statement and there's a blocker and everyone agrees that we just need to get rid of this thing or archive it, no one's going to say no, like if everyone agrees. Whereas I think there are lots of other places, lots of other sort of organizations where that isn't the case, where the assumptions are never challenged, and you end up having to operate within a certain set of parameters that we don't have to here, because as I said, nothing's sacred. You can propose anything, and if it's a good idea and everyone agrees, then we should pursue it.
Yeah, your controls never become your crutches, right? So even if you have some controls we've historically had this, so what? Can we better them? Are they serving our purpose anymore? If not, let's scrap them, start from scratch.
There's never like a final stage, even when you will spend weeks and weeks and weeks working on something and think this is it, this is a solution. Like you said, the next time you present to someone, they'll say, okay, so what next? Or what can you apply this to now? Or have you thought about this? Or what about we do this in this context? So there's never a close to the conversation. I will go to a developer and I don't have any background in coding, and I will sort of say, well, this is my sort of dream, how I want this to look, what I want it to do, all of these different elements. And I'll sort of tell them, say, is this even possible? Can we do this? And they'll say, yeah, we can do anything you want. Just we need to know what it needs to do. So have that communication back and forth is also like drives creativity when there's no barriers, or like there's no one's going to say, no, we can't do this. We can actually do it. It's just dependent on how much information you can get at how well you can structure it.
Okay, so that was a really good discussion. I think we should wrap up.
I used to just assume that all ops managers inherently do the same thing, but like today's discussion kind of like brought it to the surface that indeed we all operate from that first principles approach. We all have the same kind of mentality as far as like approaching situations is concerned, no matter where we are in the business.
Yeah, I think when you're working in a company like Revolut, where everything is incredibly flat and fast, things change on an almost daily basis. And so having that agility and that willingness to sort of learn new things and get stuck in is really what I guess being an operations manager is all about. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I would have taken away from today's discussion. What would you say to anyone looking to start their career in fintech or to join Revolut?
Well, I would say there's a lot that you can learn. It's just whether or not you actually want to learn it. There's every resource, every person knows. You don't need to worry about the content, but operations, as long as you're really there to have those principles and you're really keen for diving so deep into the details, but being able to winnow out and like really talk about the big picture, then I would say that probably you'd be a very good fit.
I think if what you're looking for is diversity in terms of like variety of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and something that's challenging and fast-paced, then definitely Revolut's the place for you. And the skills you can pick up when you get here, but that sort of ethos of trying to get things done and wanting to sort of learn and sort of have that variety is sort of what makes someone successful in this business.
Don't get scared about a tough challenge. Just start doing it, and you're gonna eventually get there. We become afterwards SME of this ops, let's say, area. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's great visibility, there's great learning opportunities, there's great trajectory opportunities as well for you. Just jump in with both feet, and that's the first step. Dream team.
I feel so motivated to go back to work.